I never thought my life would fall apart on a Tuesday afternoon. That's when everything I'd built over 43 years came crashing down around me, and the person holding the sledgehammer was someone I'd welcomed into my family with open arms. My name is Margaret, and I'd always believed that kindness and generosity would come back to you eventually. I raised my son Daniel to be a good man, worked 2 jobs to put him through college after my husband left us, when Daniel was just 8 years old. I scrubbed floors at the hospital during the night shift, and managed inventory at a grocery store during the day. Sleep was something I borrowed in small increments, but I never complained. Daniel was my world, and watching him graduate with honors made every exhausted moment worth it. The house I lived in wasn't much, but it was mine. Well, technically it was still under mortgage, but I'd been paying it down for 22 years. 3 bedrooms, a small kitchen with yellow wallpaper I'd hung myself, and a backyard where I grew tomatoes every summer. The neighborhood had changed over the years, gotten rougher around the edges, but it was home. Every creaky floorboard told a story. Every stain on the carpet was a memory. Daniel met Rebecca during his first year working at the accounting firm downtown. She was beautiful in that polished way that made me feel suddenly aware of my own worn hands and discount store clothes. Tall, blonde, always dressed like she was heading to a business meeting even on weekends. When Daniel brought her home for the first time, she looked around my living room with these cool, appraising eyes, like she was calculating the value of everything she saw. I should have trusted my instincts then. But Daniel was glowing with happiness, and I'd learned long ago that sometimes you have to swallow your doubts for the sake of the people you love. Rebecca, this is my mom. She's the strongest person I know. Daniel's words made my chest swell with pride. Nice to meet you, Margaret. Daniel talks about you constantly. Rebecca's smile didn't quite reach her eyes, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Not everyone was warm and effusive. Some people just took time to open up. They got married 18 months later. The wedding was small, mostly Rebecca's family and friends. I noticed how her mother, Patricia, kept touching the pearl necklace at her throat and whispering to the other guests. I caught fragments of their conversations. Daniel certainly married up from his circumstances, didn't he? The comment stung, but I held my head high. I'd given Daniel something more valuable than money. I'd given him values, work ethic, and unconditional love. After the wedding, Daniel started visiting less. At first, it was understandable. Newlyweds needed time together. But then weeks would pass between phone calls. When I'd try to reach out, Rebecca would answer his phone. "Oh, Margaret, Daniel's so busy with the new promotion. You understand, right? I'll have him call you back." He never did. Things got worse after I had my accident at work. I slipped on a freshly mopped floor at the hospital, fell hard on my hip. The doctor said I'd need surgery and months of physical therapy. The medical bills started piling up, and with me unable to work both jobs, money got tight. Real tight. I called Daniel, hating myself for having to ask. "Honey, I know you're busy, but I'm in a bind here. The mortgage payment is due, and with the medical bills..." "Mom, let me talk to Rebecca. We'll figure something out." Hope flickered in my chest. Maybe I'd been wrong about her. Maybe she did care. 2 days later, they showed up at my door. Daniel looked uncomfortable, wouldn't quite meet my eyes. Rebecca stood beside him, her expression unreadable. "Margaret, we've been talking. Daniel and I want to help you." Relief washed over me. "Thank you so much. I'll pay you back as soon as I'm back on my feet." Rebecca held up a hand. "Actually, we have a better idea. Why don't you sign the house over to us? We'll take care of all the payments, all the bills. You won't have to worry about anything." Something cold settled in my stomach. Sign over the house? It just makes sense. You're struggling, and we're in a position to help. Plus, Daniel grew up here. It means something to him. This way, you get to stay in your home, and we handle all the financial stress. Daniel finally spoke up. "Mom, it's a good solution. You won't have to worry about losing the house." My hands started shaking. "But it's my house. I've been paying the mortgage for over 20 years. Rebecca's expression hardened slightly. "And you're behind on payments now. The bank sent a notice, didn't they? We're offering you a way to keep your home." She was right about the notice. I'd received it last week, a stark warning printed on official letterhead. "I don't know. Can I think about it?" Rebecca's smile was sharp. "Of course. But don't take too long. We can't let this opportunity pass. If you lose the house to foreclosure, you'll have nothing." They left, and I sat in my kitchen for hours, staring at the yellow wallpaper. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong. But what choice did I have? I was drowning in debt, unable to work, and facing the real possibility of losing everything. I signed the papers 3 days later. Daniel and Rebecca were all smiles, promising that nothing would change. "You'll always have a home here, Mom. This is just paperwork." I wanted to believe him. For a few months, things seemed okay. They paid the mortgage, covered some of my medical bills. I recovered slowly from my surgery, started physical therapy, but then small things started changing. Rebecca began redecorating. She replaced my comfortable old couch with a modern sectional in stark white. The yellow wallpaper came down, replaced with gray paint that made the kitchen feel cold. I thought we were just doing paperwork. I thought nothing would change. Times change, Margaret. The house needed updating. But this is still my home. Actually, it's our home now, legally speaking. The words hit me like a slap. What? Rebecca's mask finally dropped completely. You signed the house over to us. It's in our names. You're living here as our guest. Panic clawed at my throat. Daniel, you said nothing would change. My son wouldn't look at me. Mom, we're still taking care of you. You have a roof over your head. But over the next few months, that roof felt less and less like mine. Rebecca made more changes. She threw out my furniture, piece by piece. The rocking chair where I'd nursed Daniel as a baby, gone. The dining table where we'd eaten every meal together, replaced with something sleek and modern. I tried to talk to Daniel alone, but Rebecca was always there, always watching. You're being ungrateful. We saved you from foreclosure. Every time I objected to something, that was her response. Ungrateful, ungrateful, ungrateful. Then came the day Rebecca announced they were having family over for dinner. Her parents, her sister, some friends. She handed me an apron. I need you to help serve. Make yourself useful. I stared at her in disbelief. You want me to serve at a dinner party? In my own house? It's not your house anymore. And yes, I need help. Unless you'd rather find somewhere else to live? The threat was clear. I served dinner that night, carrying plates to Rebecca's family while they laughed and drank expensive wine. Patricia, Rebecca's mother, watched me with obvious satisfaction. It's so nice of you to help out like this, Margaret. Like having live-in help. The humiliation burned in my chest, but I kept my mouth shut. Where would I go if Rebecca kicked me out? I had no savings, limited mobility from my injury, and no other family. After that night, things deteriorated rapidly. Rebecca started treating me like a servant. She'd leave lists of chores, expect me to clean and cook. When I pushed back, she'd threaten to make me leave. Daniel saw it happening. He had to see it, but he never said anything, never defended me. Son, please, this isn't right. Mom, just try to get along with her. For me? Get along with her? She's treating me like a maid in my own home. It's her home too. You need to accept that. Something broke inside me then. My son, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, was choosing his wife over his mother. Not just choosing her, but enabling her cruelty. Months passed in this strange, painful limbo. I became a ghost in the house I'd bought with my own sweat and tears. I stayed mostly in my bedroom, a space Rebecca hadn't yet claimed, though I knew it was only a matter of time. Then Rebecca got pregnant. When they announced it, I tried to feel happy. This was my grandchild, my legacy continuing. But Rebecca's eyes, when she looked at me, held a new calculation. We're going to need the space. For the nursery. What space? Your room. It has the best light. That's my bedroom. Where am I supposed to sleep? We'll figure something out. Maybe the basement? The basement was unfinished, damp, with a concrete floor and exposed pipes. You can't be serious. Do I look like I'm joking? I turned to Daniel, desperate. You're going to let her put me in the basement? He had the decency to look ashamed, but still he said nothing to stop it. That night I lay awake in my bed, knowing my time in this room was limited. I thought about my life, about all the choices that had led me here. Had I been too soft? Too giving? Had I taught Daniel to value kindness, only to have him forget it the moment it became inconvenient? I started making plans. I couldn't stay here, not like this. But leaving required money, resources I didn't have. I began looking for work, anything I could do with my physical limitations. I applied to remote data entry positions, customer service roles I could do from home. I got rejected again and again. Too old, too inexperienced with technology, too expensive to insure. Rebecca grew bigger with pregnancy and meaner with power. She seemed to enjoy finding new ways to diminish me. Margaret, this bathroom is filthy. Clean it. Margaret, the groceries need to be put away. Now. Margaret, you're breathing too loudly. Go somewhere else. I became smaller and smaller. Trying to take up less space caused fewer problems. It was like being erased, one cruel comment at a time. The baby was born on a cold March morning. A girl, tiny and perfect. They named her Sophia. When the nurse placed her in my arms at the hospital, something shifted in my chest. This innocent child, my granddaughter, deserved better than to grow up watching her grandmother being abused. I needed to find my strength again, not for me, but for her. But when they brought Sophia home, Rebecca made it clear I wasn't to touch the baby without permission. I don't want you getting your poor person germs on my daughter. The comment was so absurd, so cruel, that I actually laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed in months, and it felt like defiance. That's ridiculous. Rebecca's face turned red. Excuse me? I said that's ridiculous. I'm not diseased. I'm her grandmother. You're nothing. You're here because we allow it. Don't forget that. Something in me snapped. Maybe it was months of accumulated hurt, or maybe it was the protective instinct that came with having a grandchild. But I stood up straighter than I had in ages. This was my house. I built this life. Was your house. Past tense. Get it through your thick skull. The argument escalated. Daniel came running, trying to calm everyone down, but I was done being calm. You're abusing me. Both of you. You manipulated me into signing over my house, and now you're treating me like garbage. We saved you! Rebecca shouted back. You trapped me. That's when Rebecca slapped me, hard, across the face. The shock of it more than the pain made me stumble backward. How dare you talk to me like that in my house? I touched my burning cheek, looking at Daniel. Surely now he'd say something. But he just stood there, frozen. Get out, pack your things and get out. Rebecca's voice was ice. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem. I looked at my son one more time, giving him a chance to be the man I'd raised him to be. He looked away. I packed a single suitcase that night. 22 years of memories, reduced to one bag of clothes and a few photographs. I had $43 in my wallet and nowhere to go. I walked out into the night, leaving behind the house I'd bought with my own money, leaving behind the son I'd sacrificed everything for. The air was cold, biting through my thin jacket. I hadn't thought to grab my warm coat. I hadn't thought about much of anything except getting away from Rebecca's triumphant face and Daniel's cowardly silence. I walked for hours through streets that looked different in the darkness. Every bench I passed, I wondered if this was where I'd sleep tonight. Every storefront awning looked like potential shelter from the wind. My suitcase grew heavier with each block, my hip aching from the old injury. Around midnight, I found myself outside a church I'd passed 1,000 times but never entered. There was a sign by the door, faded but still readable. Safe Haven Ministry, 24-hour crisis line. The number was printed below. My hands shook as I dialed on my phone, one of the few things I'd managed to keep. The battery was at 15%. Safe Haven, this is Gloria speaking. How can I help you tonight? The kindness in her voice broke something in me. I don't have anywhere to go. My daughter-in-law kicked me out. I'm standing outside a church and I don't know what to do. Gloria's voice remained calm, soothing. You're at St. Michael's on 7th Street? Stay right there, honey. I'm sending someone to let you in. You're going to be okay. 20 minutes later, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and warm brown eyes unlocked the church door. She introduced herself as Gloria, the same person I'd spoken to on the phone. Come in, come in. Let's get you somewhere warm. She led me through the church to a small office in the back, made me tea and listened while I told her everything. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge, just listened with those kind eyes. The women's shelter across town is full tonight, but we have a temporary housing program here. It's not fancy, but you'll have a bed, meals, and time to figure things out. She took me to a large room that had been converted into a dormitory. 6 cots lined the walls, 3 occupied by sleeping women. Gloria showed me to an empty cot, gave me sheets and a blanket, and pointed out the locker where I could store my belongings. Breakfast is at 7. We'll help you figure out next steps in the morning. For now, just rest. I'd hit rock bottom. But strangely, lying on that uncomfortable cot surrounded by strangers, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Free. I woke to the sound of women talking quietly, getting ready for the day. The woman in the cot next to mine noticed I was awake. First night, I'm Teresa. She was probably in her 50s, with tired eyes and a gentle smile. I'm Margaret. Yeah, first night. It gets easier. Gloria and the other volunteers here, they're good people. They actually care. Over breakfast in the church's community room, I met the other women. There was Yolanda, who'd left an abusive husband with nothing but her kids and the clothes on their backs. Her children were staying with her sister while she got back on her feet. There was Kim, a veteran who'd been living in her car after losing her job. There was Anita, whose medical bills from cancer treatment had bankrupted her. Each woman had a story. Each story was different but shared common threads. Bad luck, bad choices, bad people, or some combination of all three. None of them looked like I'd imagined homeless people would look. They looked like me, ordinary women who'd fallen through the cracks. Teresa, the woman who'd greeted me that morning, had been staying at the church for 3 months. She'd been evicted after her landlord sold the building to developers. I had a job, paid my rent on time for 12 years. Didn't matter. They wanted us all out so they could build luxury condos. I couldn't find another place I could afford fast enough. She worked as a home health aide during the day, was saving up for first month, last month, and deposit on a new apartment. It's hard, working full-time but still being homeless. People don't understand that having a job doesn't mean you can afford housing in this city. Her words resonated with me. I'd always been one paycheck away from disaster, even when I had 2 jobs. The accident had just accelerated the inevitable. The church had rules. We had to be out by 8 in the morning unless we had a documented medical excuse. We could return at 6 in the evening. No drugs, no alcohol, no men in the women's dormitory. 3 strikes and you were out. But within those rules, Gloria and the volunteers treated us with dignity. Gloria ran a job training program twice a week, teaching resume writing and interview skills. She brought in donated professional clothes for job interviews. She helped us navigate social services, figure out which programs we qualified for. On my 3rd day there, she sat down with me after breakfast. "Margaret, tell me about your situation. What happened?" So I told her everything. About Daniel, about Rebecca, about signing over the house. "That sounds like elder abuse and financial exploitation. Have you talked to a lawyer?" "I can't afford a lawyer. There are legal aid societies. They help people who can't afford attorneys. Let me make some calls." That afternoon, Gloria introduced me to a young woman named Ashley who volunteered at a local legal clinic. "I'm not a lawyer yet. I'm still in law school. But I can help you navigate the system, figure out what resources are available." Ashley spent 2 hours going through my situation, asking questions, taking notes. She explained that what Rebecca and Daniel had done might be illegal. You signed those papers while you were on pain medication, facing foreclosure, and under pressure from family members. That's duress. And the way they treated you afterwards, that's abuse. We need to document everything. She helped me write down a timeline of events. Every conversation I could remember. Every cruel comment. Every threat. Writing it all down made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't being dramatic. I was a victim of abuse. Over the next week, Ashley connected me with Marcus Chen at the Legal Aid Society. Marcus had been practicing elder law for 5 years, had a reputation for taking on difficult cases. When I met him in his cramped office, surrounded by file boxes and empty coffee cups, I felt a flicker of hope for the first time in months. "Mrs. Hayes, I've reviewed your case. What happened to you is unconscionable. I want to help. But can we actually get my house back?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, choosing his words carefully. "I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to be difficult. The house is legally in their names now. But there are laws against financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. You were injured, on medication, facing financial crisis. They pressured you into signing. That's textbook coercion. How long will it take?" "Months, maybe a year or more. And we'll need evidence. Can you get copies of your medical records from the time you signed the papers? Bank statements showing the financial pressure you were under?" "I can try. Also, we need to prove the pattern of abuse that followed. Did you document any of it? Take photos, save text messages?" I hadn't. I'd been too busy surviving to think about documentation. "That's okay. We'll work with what we have. But from now on, document everything. If you have any contact with them, write it down immediately. Date, time, what was said." The legal process was slow and frustrating. Marcus filed a petition to reverse the property transfer based on undue influence and exploitation. Daniel and Rebecca's lawyer filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that I'd signed willingly and was now suffering from buyer's remorse. I had to get copies of my medical records, which required phone calls and paperwork and waiting. I had to request my employment records from the hospital and grocery store, showing my income and then my sudden loss of income after the injury. I had to get statements from my doctors about the pain medication I'd been taking. Each piece of evidence felt like a small victory, but also like picking at a wound that wouldn't heal. Meanwhile, life at the church continued. I started helping with meal preparation, a way to feel useful and earn my keep. I got to know the other women better. Teresa and I became friends, bonding over our shared experiences of betrayal and loss. She told me about her daughter, who she hadn't seen in 5 years. She got mixed up with a bad crowd, started using drugs. I tried to help her, tried everything. But she stole from me, lied to me, brought dangerous people to my apartment. I had to choose between enabling her addiction and protecting myself. I chose myself, and she hasn't spoken to me since. Do you regret it? Every day. But I know it was the right choice. Sometimes loving someone means setting boundaries, even when it hurts. Her words stayed with me. I'd never set boundaries with Daniel. I'd given and given until there was nothing left of me to give. Yolanda shared her story one evening while we were folding donated clothes for the church's outreach program. He never hit me where it would show. Always the stomach, the ribs, places I could hide, and the things he'd say about how stupid I was, how worthless. After 15 years, I believed him. What made you leave? One day, my daughter asked me why I let Daddy hurt me. She was 6 years old. 6. And I realized she was learning that this was normal, that this was what love looked like. I couldn't let her grow up thinking that. Yolanda had escaped with her daughters in the middle of the night while her husband was passed out drunk. She'd left behind everything except her children and some clothes. I don't regret it. I'm sleeping on a cot in a church, but I'm free. My girls are safe. That's all that matters. These women, these survivors, they became my teachers. They showed me that starting over wasn't shameful. They showed me that asking for help was strength, not weakness. They showed me that I wasn't alone. The church also had a therapist who volunteered twice a week, offering free counseling sessions. Her name was Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, and she specialized in trauma and family estrangement. My first session with her, I barely made it through without crying. I don't understand how it came to this. I gave him everything. How did my own son throw me away like garbage? Dr. Okonkwo handed me a tissue, her expression compassionate but direct. You're asking the wrong question, Margaret. The question isn't why he did this to you. The question is why you accepted treatment that no one should accept. What do you mean? Tell me about your relationship with Daniel before Rebecca. Were there times he took you for granted? Times he didn't show up for you? I thought back. Daniel forgetting my birthday 3 years in a row. Daniel canceling plans at the last minute. Daniel always needing something but rarely asking about my life, I guess. But he was busy, building his career. And you made excuses for him. You've been making excuses for the people in your life for a very long time, haven't you? The words stung because they were true. My ex-husband who left, the bosses who overworked and underpaid me, the friends who only called when they needed something. I taught people to treat me badly by accepting bad treatment. You taught people that your needs didn't matter by never asserting them. That's different from deserving bad treatment. You didn't deserve any of this, Margaret. But you need to learn how to value yourself, how to set boundaries, how to say no. Over the following weeks, Dr. Okonkwo helped me understand the patterns I'd fallen into. The people-pleasing, the martyrdom, the belief that love meant sacrifice without reciprocity. You can be generous without being a doormat. You can be kind without being exploited. But you need to believe you're worth protecting. In one session, she had me make a list of things I wanted for my future. I want my house back. What else? I paused. I'd spent so many years wanting things for Daniel that I'd forgotten to want things for myself. I want a job that doesn't destroy my body. I want friends who value me. I want to feel safe in my own home. I want to help other people who've been through what I've been through. Those are good goals. Now let's talk about how to get there. Marcus had filed all the initial paperwork for the lawsuit, but he prepared me for the reality of the legal process. This is going to get ugly, Margaret. They're going to paint you as a bitter, spiteful mother. They're going to claim you were of sound mind when you signed, that you're just having regrets now. You need to be prepared for that. But I wasn't of sound mind. I was on medication, in pain, terrified of losing everything. I know, and will prove that. But it's going to be painful to hear them attack your character. The depositions started 3 months after we filed. I had to sit in a conference room while Rebecca and Daniel's lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Gerald Thompson, questioned me for hours. Mrs. Hayes, you claim you were coerced into signing over your property, but you had time to think about it, didn't you? They gave you 3 days. I was desperate. They made it sound like the only option. Or maybe it was the only option. You were facing foreclosure, were you not? Yes, but they manipulated the situation. How? By offering to help their struggling mother? His tone was mocking, dismissive. It took everything in me not to break down. They promised nothing would change. They lied. Can you prove they made that promise? Do you have it in writing? No, but Daniel said it. Multiple times. So it's your word against theirs. And you're the one who benefits from claiming coercion, aren't you? Marcus objected, and the deposition continued for another hour. By the end, I was exhausted, shaking, questioning everything. You did great. I know it was hard, but you held up under pressure. That's important. When is this going to be over? We're just getting started. Next week, we depose Daniel and Rebecca. I wasn't allowed to be present for their depositions, but Marcus told me about them afterwards. Daniel was uncomfortable the whole time. He admitted you seemed reluctant, admitted you expressed concerns. He couldn't justify how quickly things changed after you signed. And Rebecca? She's a piece of work. Cold. Calculated. She claims everything she did was reasonable home ownership, but she slipped up a few times, revealed her true feelings about you. What did she say? That you were a burden. That you were holding Daniel back. that the house was wasted on someone like you. Marcus's face was grim. She actually said those things in a deposition? She did, and it's going to help our case. But it still took months. Months of waiting for court dates, for motions to be filed and answered, for discovery to be completed. During that time, I had to keep living, keep surviving. I found a part-time job working remotely for a company that hired people to do data entry. It wasn't much, barely minimum wage, but it was something. I could do it from my laptop at the church during the day. Gloria helped me apply for assistance programs. I got food stamps, which took some of the pressure off. I applied for disability benefits based on my hip injury, though the application process was Byzantine and slow. Teresa got her apartment and moved out. On her last night at the church, we had a small celebration, everyone chipping in for a cake from the grocery store. You're going to be okay, Margaret. You're stronger than you think. I'm going to miss you. Call me anytime. We're friends now. Real friends. And she meant it. Even after she moved into her tiny studio apartment, she'd call me every week to check in. New women cycled through the church dormitory. I watched them go through the same process I had. Shock, grief, slowly rebuilding. I started helping them, sharing what I'd learned, offering encouragement. Gloria noticed. You're good at this. Have you ever thought about social work? I don't have the education for that. You could get it. There are online programs, financial aid. You've got lived experience, Margaret. That's valuable. The idea planted itself in my mind. Maybe this nightmare could have a purpose. Maybe I could help others avoid what I'd been through, or at least help them survive it. I started researching online certificate programs in social work and victim advocacy. I couldn't afford a full degree, but there were shorter programs that might give me credentials to work in this field. In therapy with Dr. Okonkwo, I talked about this new possibility. It feels selfish to be thinking about my future when I haven't even gotten my house back yet. It's not selfish, it's healthy. You're building a life beyond this crisis. That's exactly what you should be doing. But what if I lose the case? What if I never get the house back? Then you'll still have built something. You'll still have value and purpose and a path forward. Don't tie your worth to that outcome. The court date was set for 7 months after we filed the initial petition. Marcus prepared me extensively, doing mock questioning, teaching me how to stay calm under cross-examination. Tell the truth. Don't exaggerate. Don't get defensive. If you don't remember something, say you don't remember. Thompson is going to try to rattle you. Don't let him. The morning of the hearing, I put on a donated suit that Gloria had helped me pick out. It was slightly too big, but I felt more like myself than I had in a long time. Kim, who was still staying at the church, squeezed my hand before I left. Go get your house back. The courthouse was intimidating, all marble and echoing voices. Marcus met me outside the courtroom, reviewing our strategy one last time. Remember, you're the victim here. Let your truth come through. Inside the courtroom, I saw Daniel and Rebecca for the first time in 7 months. Rebecca looked polished and professional in an expensive suit. Daniel looked thinner, older, tired. When our eyes met, he looked away quickly. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Morrison, called the proceedings to order. I had to testify first. I walked to the witness stand on shaking legs, placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. Marcus led me through my story. How I'd raised Daniel alone. How I'd worked 2 jobs. How I'd been injured and faced foreclosure. How Daniel and Rebecca had promised to help, then manipulated me into signing over my house. Mrs. Hayes, when you signed those papers, did you understand what you were agreeing to? I thought I was just letting them help with payments. They said nothing would change. They said I'd always have a home there. And did they keep that promise? No. As soon as the house was in their names, everything changed. Then Thompson cross-examined me, and it was brutal. Mrs. Hayes, isn't it true that you were facing foreclosure? Yes, but that's because I was injured and couldn't work. And my clients offered you a solution. They offered to take my house. They offered to save your house. There's a difference. He went on like that for an hour, twisting my words, implying I was greedy and vengeful. But I remembered Marcus's advice. I stayed calm, told the truth, didn't rise to the bait. Then it was Daniel's turn to testify. Marcus questioned him about the circumstances of the signing, about what promises were made, about how I'd been treated afterwards. Mr. Hayes, did your mother seem reluctant to sign the property over? A little, yes. But you pressured her anyway? We thought it was the best solution. Best for whom? Daniel hesitated. For everyone. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like it was best for you and your wife. You got a house with substantial equity for nothing. Your mother got abused and eventually thrown out. Objection. Argumentative. Judge Morrison sustained the objection, but the point had been made. Rebecca's testimony was chilling. She showed no remorse, no recognition that she'd done anything wrong. Mrs. Hayes, did you hit Margaret? It wasn't a hit, it was a tap. She was being hysterical. You're admitting you struck her? I removed her from my home. She was out of control. Your home, or her home? My home. Legally, it was my home. The next morning, I met with a social worker named Linda. She was in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense attitude. Tell me your story. So I did. All of it. The manipulation, the abuse, how I'd been tricked into signing over my house. You need a lawyer. What they did might be considered elder abuse and coercion. I can't afford a lawyer. There are legal aid societies. Let me make some calls. Linda connected me with a lawyer named Marcus Chen, who specialized in elder abuse cases. He was young, maybe 30, with wire-rimmed glasses and an intensity that was immediately reassuring. This is textbook financial exploitation. You signed those papers under duress while you were medically vulnerable and facing foreclosure. We can fight this. But the house is in their names now. Doesn't matter. The law recognizes that elder abuse includes financial coercion. If we can prove they manipulated you during a period of vulnerability, we can potentially reverse the transfer. Hope, dangerous and bright, flickered in my chest. How long will it take? Could be months, maybe longer. And I need to be honest with you, Margaret. It's not a guaranteed win, but you have a strong case. I'll do it, whatever it takes. The legal battle that followed was brutal. Rebecca and Daniel hired an expensive lawyer who painted me as a bitter, ungrateful mother trying to steal from her generous son. They produced the papers I'd signed, argued I'd been of sound mind, claimed they'd only been trying to help. I had to testify about my lowest moments, admit to strangers how desperate I'd been. The opposing lawyer was merciless. Isn't it true that you were facing foreclosure? Yes. And my clients offered you a solution. They offered to take my house. They offered to save your house. There's a difference. They manipulated me when I was vulnerable. Or maybe you're just having seller's remorse now that the house has appreciated in value. The implication that I was motivated by greed rather than justice made my blood boil. But Marcus was good. He brought in medical records showing my injury and pain medication use at the time of signing. He found the bank notices threatening foreclosure, established the timeline of pressure. He even got Daniel on the stand. Mr. Hayes, did your mother seem reluctant to sign over the house? Daniel squirmed in his seat. A little, yes. Did she express concerns? Yes, but we assured her it was the best solution. Did you have any intention of returning the house to her once she got back on her feet? Daniel hesitated, and in that hesitation, the truth was visible. The house needed to stay in the family. But it was already in the family. It was your mother's house. Rebecca tried to interject from her seat, but the judge gavelled her into silence. Rebecca's lack of remorse was stunning. Even Thompson seemed uncomfortable with her cold demeanor. But he pressed on, calling character witnesses who testified that I'd seemed competent when I signed the papers, that I'd never mentioned feeling pressured. They brought in the notary who'd witnessed my signature, a young man who barely remembered me. Did Mrs. Hayes seem coerced or under duress? No, she seemed fine. A little sad, maybe, but she signed willingly. Marcus challenged this on cross-examination. You spent approximately how long with Mrs. Hayes? Maybe 10 minutes? And in those 10 minutes, you could tell her entire emotional state? You could know whether she'd been pressured by family members for days before you arrived? I just know she signed the papers. The judge looked thoughtful during this exchange. Thompson also tried to argue that my injuries were exaggerated, that I'd been perfectly capable of working but chose not to. He called an expert witness, a doctor who'd never examined me, who testified that hip injuries like mine were common and usually didn't prevent all work. Marcus countered with my actual treating physicians, who testified about the severity of my injury, the pain I'd been in, the limitations I'd faced. Marcus's closing argument was powerful. He showed photos of me from before the injury, vibrant and active. Photos from during the abuse, showing how much weight I'd lost, how haunted I looked. He read excerpts from my medical records about depression and anxiety. He showed the bank notices threatening foreclosure. This is a textbook case of elder abuse and financial exploitation. Margaret Hayes was vulnerable, injured, medicated, and facing financial catastrophe. Her son and daughter-in-law saw an opportunity and took it. They promised her nothing would change, then systematically stripped her of her dignity, her belongings, and finally her home. They physically assaulted her and threw her out with nothing. This wasn't help, this was predatory behavior, and it needs to be remedied. Thompson's closing tried to paint a different picture. This is a family disagreement, nothing more. Mrs. Hayes signed legal documents transferring property. She regrets it now, perhaps because the house has appreciated in value, perhaps because she's lonely and bitter. But regret doesn't invalidate a legal transaction. My clients tried to help her. If she couldn't abide by reasonable house rules, if she became confrontational and difficult, they had every right to ask her to leave their home. The judge asked several questions before adjourning. Mr. Thompson, your clients claim they were helping Mrs. Hayes, but they didn't return the house to her once she recovered, did they? No, Your Honor, but the house had become their family home by then. And the slap? How do you justify physical violence against a vulnerable adult? It was a moment of frustration. Mrs. Hayes was being irrational. The judge's expression was severe. I'll take this under advisement. Those 30 days of waiting for the ruling were excruciating. I analyzed every word spoken in court, every expression on the judge's face. Had I been believable? Had I said too much or too little? Would the legal system actually protect me or side with the people who had the money for better lawyers? Marcus tried to manage my expectations. You never know with judges. Some are sympathetic to elder abuse cases, some aren't. Judge Morrison has a good reputation, but I can't predict which way she'll rule. What happens if we lose? Then you'll need to decide if you want to appeal, but let's not think about that yet. During those 30 days, I threw myself into helping at the church. I cooked meals, organized donations, listened to other women's stories. Keeping busy was the only way to stay sane. I also started journaling, something Dr. Okonkwo had suggested months earlier, but I'd resisted. Write about your feelings, not for anyone else, just for you. Process this experience on paper. The journal became my confidant. I wrote about my anger, my grief, my fear. I wrote letters to Daniel that I'd never send, telling him everything I wished I could say. I wrote about my dreams for the future, both the realistic ones and the impossible ones. One entry, written 2 weeks before the ruling, stood out. I don't know if I'll get my house back, but I've already gotten something back that's more important. I've gotten me back. The woman who signs this journal isn't the woman who signed away her house. She's someone new, someone stronger, someone who knows her worth. Whether or not the judge rules in my favor, I'm going to be okay, because I've learned that I can survive anything. When Marcus finally called with the news, I was in the church kitchen making soup for dinner. Margaret, sit down, I have news. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break through my chest. Tell me. The judge ruled in your favor. The house transfer is being reversed. You're getting your home back. The words didn't make sense at first. I had to ask him to repeat them. You won. The judge found clear evidence of undue influence and exploitation. She's ordering the property returned to your name. She wrote a blistering opinion, Margaret. She didn't just rule for you. She condemned what they did. Let me read you part of it. He cleared his throat and read, This court finds the evidence of elder abuse and financial exploitation overwhelming. The defendants targeted Mrs. Hayes during a period of extreme vulnerability, used family relationship and false promises to coerce her into signing away her property, then subjected her to months of psychological abuse and neglect in her own home. The slap witnessed and described by Mrs. Hayes represents not merely assault, but a physical manifestation of the defendant's complete disregard for her humanity. This court will not allow such predatory behavior to stand. The property transfer is hereby reversed, and all rights returned to Mrs. Hayes. I couldn't speak. Tears streamed down my face as the reality sank in. I was getting my house back, my home, my life. There's more. The judge also awarded you damages for the months of abuse and wrongful eviction. It's not a huge amount, but it'll help you get back on your feet. She ordered Daniel and Rebecca to pay you $25,000 for the mental and emotional harm they caused. Plus, she's ordering them to pay your legal fees. The other women in the kitchen had stopped what they were doing, watching me cry. I won! I won! Gloria came over and hugged me tight. Of course you did. Justice prevailed. But it wasn't just about justice. It was about validation. A judge, someone with authority and power, had looked at my situation and said, This was wrong. You were wronged. You deserve restitution. That evening, the church held an impromptu celebration. Someone had brought a cake from the grocery store bakery, white with pink roses and "Congratulations, Margaret," written in blue icing. We gathered in the common room, all the temporary residents and volunteers, and celebrated not just my victory, but the possibility of victory for all of us. Teresa, who'd moved into her apartment months earlier but still volunteered at the church, gave a toast. To Margaret, who showed us all that it's never too late to fight back, who proved that the system can work if you're brave enough to use it. You're an inspiration. I'd never thought of myself as an inspiration. I'd just been trying to survive. But looking around at these women, some of whom had started documenting their own abuse cases after watching mine unfold, I realized that my fight had meant something beyond just getting my house back. Maria pulled me aside after the celebration. I talked to a lawyer yesterday. about my daughter stealing my identity. I wouldn't have had the courage if I hadn't seen you do it first. Tears filled my eyes. You can do this. If I can, you can. Frank shared that he'd started a blog about elder financial abuse, using his own experience and the things he'd learned from my case. People need to know this is happening, that their own children can be predators, that there's help available if they're brave enough to reach out. The victory felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. Not just for me, but for a whole community of people who'd been taught to stay silent about family abuse. The next morning, I called Linda, my cousin in Oregon. I won. I'm getting my house back. She screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Maggie, oh my God, I knew you would. When can I come visit? Soon, once I get moved back in and settled. I'm so proud of you. Mom would be so proud of you. Our mothers had been sisters, close until both had died young. Linda was right. My mother would have been proud. She'd always told me to stand up for myself, advice I'd ignored for decades. Robert took me out to dinner that night to celebrate. We went to a nice restaurant, nicer than anywhere I'd been in years. Order anything you want. This is your night. I ordered the salmon, something I'd never have spent money on for myself. We toasted with wine, and he held my hand across the table. You did something remarkable, Margaret. You fought for yourself when it would have been easier to give up. I had a lot of help, but you did the hard part. You showed up. You told your truth. You didn't back down. The case took 7 months to resolve. 7 months of living at the church shelter, of working the small jobs I could find, of rebuilding myself piece by piece. During that time, I started attending a support group at the church for people who'd experienced family estrangement. Hearing other people's stories helped me understand I wasn't alone. There was Maria, whose daughter had stolen her identity and ruined her credit. There was Frank, whose son had gotten him to sign over power of attorney and then emptied his bank accounts. There was Jennifer, whose entire family had turned on her when she refused to enable her brother's addiction. We became friends, this ragtag group of discarded parents and grandparents. We supported each other through court dates and setbacks, celebrated small victories, and reminded each other that we had value even if our families couldn't see it. I also started seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Patricia Okonkwo who specialized in family trauma. You need to grieve, Margaret. You lost your son even though he's still alive. That's a unique kind of pain. How do I grieve someone who's still here? You acknowledge the loss. You feel it. And then you start building a life that isn't centered around him. It was harder than it sounded. I'd spent decades making Daniel the center of my universe. Learning to put myself first felt selfish and wrong. It's not selfish to value yourself. That's actually the healthiest thing you can do, and it models healthy behavior for your granddaughter. Sophia. I hadn't seen her since the night I was kicked out. She'd be almost 8 months old now. I think about her every day. Maybe someday she'll seek you out. Maybe she'll want to know her grandmother's side of the story. But you need to be whole and healthy for that day to come. Dr. Okonkwo helped me understand that I'd been conditioned to be a caretaker at the expense of my own needs. My ex-husband had taken advantage of my giving nature, and then Rebecca had done the same. Even Daniel, though I loved him, had learned to take from me without giving back. You taught him to be a taker by never requiring him to give. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's just enabling. The words stung because they were true. On a cold November afternoon, almost 8 months after I'd been kicked out, Marcus called me. Margaret, sit down. I have news. My heart pounded. The judge ruled in your favor. The house transfer is being reversed. You're getting your home back. I couldn't speak. Tears streamed down my face. There's more. The judge also awarded you damages for the months of abuse and wrongful eviction. It's not a huge amount, but it'll help you get back on your feet. I sobbed into the phone, years of pain and fear finally releasing. Thank you so much. You did this, Margaret. You fought for yourself. That took incredible courage. When I returned to my house a week later, it felt surreal. Rebecca and Daniel had already moved out, taking most of the furniture they'd bought. The place looked bare, almost like it had when I'd first bought it 23 years ago. But it was mine. I walked through each room, touching the walls, reclaiming my space. In my old bedroom, I found something that made me stop. A photograph, tucked behind a loose piece of baseboard. It was of Daniel as a baby, me holding him, both of us laughing. Someone had drawn on it with marker, scribbling over my face. The cruelty of it took my breath away, but I gently cleaned the photo as best I could and placed it in a frame. My son was lost to me, but I could still honor the love I'd had for him. My friends from the support group helped me move in what little I owned. Maria brought curtains. Frank brought a coffee maker. Jennifer brought houseplants. We ordered pizza and sat on the floor of my empty living room, eating and laughing. This is your fresh start. What are you going to do with it? I thought about the question. I want to help people, people like us. And that's what I did. I started volunteering with the Legal Aid Society, helping other victims of elder abuse navigate the system. I shared my story at support groups and community centers. I went back to school online, getting a certificate in social work. The house slowly filled again, but this time with things I chose, pieces that meant something to me. I painted the kitchen walls a warm yellow, hung my own artwork, created a space that felt like home. Daniel reached out once, 6 months after the court ruling, a brief email. Mom, I'm sorry for how things happened. Rebecca and I are getting divorced. She wasn't who I thought she was. Part of me wanted to say, I told you so. Part of me wanted to welcome him back with open arms. But Dr. Okonkwo's words echoed in my mind. Love without boundaries isn't love, I wrote back. I appreciate your apology. What happened hurt me deeply, and I need time before I'm ready to rebuild our relationship. I hope you understand. It was the hardest email I'd ever written, but also the most honest. He wrote back immediately. Can I see you? I want to explain. Not yet. I'm not ready. Months passed. I focused on my work, my healing, my new life. I dated a little. Went to dinner with a kind man named Robert who made me laugh. I traveled to see my cousin in Oregon, took a painting class, joined a book club. I learned that I was more than someone's mother, more than someone's victim. I was Margaret, a woman who'd survived and rebuilt. I was enough, all on my own. Then, on a spring afternoon 2 years after reclaiming my house, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Daniel standing there, holding a toddler's hand. Sophia was walking now, with Rebecca's blonde curls and my own brown eyes. Mom, I know I don't deserve this. I know I failed you in every way that matters. But I'm in therapy. I'm working on myself. And I want my daughter to know her grandmother. The real story, not the lies Rebecca told. I looked at my son, seeing the boy I'd raised beneath the man who'd hurt me. He was crying. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. I looked down at Sophia, who was staring up at me with curious eyes. What do you say? I didn't answer right away. I thought about Dr. Okonkwo's advice, about boundaries and self-respect. I thought about the life I'd built without him. Come in, we can talk. But Daniel, things are different now. If you want to be in my life, you have to earn it. No more taking me for granted. I understand, whatever it takes. We sat in my living room, the yellow-painted living room that was wholly mine, and talked for hours. I told him about my journey, about the shelter and the support group and learning to value myself. He told me about Rebecca's true nature finally revealing itself, about how the divorce had forced him to examine his own behavior. I let you down when you needed me most. I chose comfort over integrity. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me. I won't promise to forget what happened, but I'm willing to try moving forward, slowly. Sophia toddled over to me, holding out a stuffed rabbit. Want to see Bunny? I'd love to see Bunny. As my granddaughter climbed into my lap, chattering away in her toddler language, I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of healing. Rebuilding our relationship took time. Daniel came to family therapy with me. He listened when I talked about the pain he'd caused. He didn't make excuses or try to rush my healing. Slowly, carefully, we began to reconstruct trust. It wasn't the relationship we'd had before. That was gone forever, destroyed by his choices and her manipulation. But it was something new, something more honest. I loved my son, but I loved myself too now, and I'd never again sacrifice one for the other. 3 years after I'd walked out with nothing but a suitcase, I stood in my backyard, watching Sophia chase butterflies through my tomato plants. Daniel was helping me build a new garden shed, both of us working in comfortable silence that had taken years to achieve. Grandma, look, a yellow one! Sophia's joy was infectious, pure and uncomplicated in a way that reminded me what really mattered in life. That's beautiful, sweetheart. Do you know butterflies start as caterpillars? They completely transform themselves. Like you, Grandma? Daniel stopped hammering, looking at me with surprise. I smiled. Yeah, like me. Sometimes we have to go through hard things to become who we're meant to be. Sophia nodded seriously, then went back to chasing butterflies, already moving on to the next moment. Children were good at that, at living fully in the present. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead, setting down his hammer. She's right, you know. You did transform. Sometimes I look at you now and barely recognize the woman from before. Not from before everything went bad, but from before. Period. You're more yourself than I've ever seen you. I considered his words. He was right. Even before Rebecca, even before the injury, I'd been living a half-life, working myself to exhaustion, never asking for what I needed, always putting everyone else first. I had to lose everything to find out who I really was. I don't recommend it as a path to self-discovery, but it worked. He laughed, a real laugh that made him look younger. Fair enough. I'm just glad you gave me the chance to know this version of you, even if I didn't deserve it. We'd had versions of this conversation many times over the past year. Each time, Daniel would express guilt and gratitude in equal measure. Each time, I'd remind him that we were building something new, not trying to resurrect what had died. Inside, I was hosting my support group that evening. We'd grown to 15 regular members, meeting monthly in my living room to share our stories and support each other. The group had become something of a legend in local social service circles. Several members had successfully fought their own legal battles, inspired by my case and guided by the resources we'd compiled together. Maria had reconciled with her daughter Christina, who'd gotten sober after hitting her own rock bottom and was now 18 months clean. It was a slow process, rebuilding trust after such profound betrayal, but they were both committed to healing. Maria brought Christina to one of our meetings, and the young woman sobbed as she apologized not just to her mother, but to all of us. I stole from her. I said terrible things. I made her feel worthless, and she still came back for me. I don't know if I'd have that strength. Maria had held her daughter's hand, tears streaming down her own face. You're showing that strength now, by getting sober, by facing what you did, by trying to make it right. Their reconciliation gave me hope for what was possible with Daniel, but it also reminded me that not all stories ended that way. Some families stayed broken, some wounds never healed. Frank had started a blog called Silver Betrayal, documenting elder financial abuse and sharing resources for victims. It had gone viral after a major news outlet picked up one of his posts. Now he got emails daily from people around the country sharing their own stories, asking for advice, just needing to be heard. I never thought something good could come from my son stealing everything I had, but if my pain can help even one person avoid the same fate, it's worth it. Jennifer had written a book about her experience with family estrangement and enabling addiction. It was published by a small press and wasn't a bestseller, but it was read by the people who needed it. She did readings at libraries and community centers, always packing the room with people hungry for validation that they weren't alone. We were survivors, all of us. We'd been knocked down, but we'd gotten back up. More than that, we'd transformed our pain into purpose. That night, after the support group left and Daniel had taken Sophia home, I sat in my yellow kitchen with a cup of tea. The house was quiet, peaceful. Mine in a way it had never been before, because now I understood what ownership really meant. Not just having your name on a deed, but feeling safe in your own space. Feeling like you belonged. I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago, desperate and frightened, signing away her home because she saw no other option. I thought about the woman who'd been slapped and thrown out, who'd slept in a shelter and rebuilt from nothing. She'd been so much stronger than she knew. I am so much stronger than I knew. The journey hadn't been linear. There were still days when doubt crept in, when I wondered if I'd made the right choices. Days when I missed the simplicity of being needed, of having a clear purpose even if that purpose was self-destructive. But those days came less frequently now, and when they did, I had tools to deal with them. I had therapy, I had my support group, I had friends who understood. My phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. Thank you for giving me another chance. I love you, Mom. Sophia wants you to know she found 3 more yellow butterflies after we got home. I smiled and typed back, I love you too. See you Sunday for dinner. Tell Sophia I can't wait to hear about all the butterflies. Our Sunday dinners had become a ritual. Nothing fancy, just simple meals in my kitchen while Sophia colored at the table and Daniel helped with dishes. We talked about safe things mostly, his work, my advocacy projects, Sophia's preschool adventures. Sometimes we ventured into harder territory, processing what had happened, acknowledging the pain while working toward forgiveness. True forgiveness was still a work in progress. Maybe it always would be. But I'd learned that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending everything was okay. It meant choosing not to let the past poison the present. The road to this moment hadn't been easy. There had been nights I'd cried myself to sleep, days I'd wanted to give up, moments I'd doubted everything. But I'd kept going. I'd found my voice, my strength, my sense of self-worth. I'd discovered that I could survive anything, even the betrayal of the person I loved most in the world. Rebecca had tried to take everything from me. She'd manipulated me when I was vulnerable, made me feel worthless in my own home, slapped me in front of witnesses, thrown me out with nothing. But she couldn't take who I was at my core. She couldn't break something she didn't understand. Resilience born from decades of surviving, of choosing to keep going even when everything fell apart. I'd reclaimed my house, but more importantly, I'd reclaimed myself. The legal victory had been important, necessary even. It had validated my experience, held my abusers accountable, given me back something that was rightfully mine. But the real victory was internal. It was learning to value myself, learning to set boundaries, learning that I deserved respect and dignity and love that didn't come with conditions or costs. As I turned off the kitchen light and headed to bed, I passed the photograph of baby Daniel and me, the one that had been defaced. I'd kept it as a reminder, not of the pain, but of the journey, of how far I'd come. Someone had tried to erase me from that picture, but here I was, more visible than I'd ever been. Tomorrow I'd wake up in my own home, in my own bed. I'd make coffee in my yellow kitchen, the color I'd chosen because it made me happy. I'd call Maria to catch up on her week. I'd work on my latest case at the legal aid office, helping a woman whose sister had forged her signature on a reverse mortgage. I'd live my life, full and complete, with or without my son's presence. Because I'd learned the most important lesson of all. I was enough. I always had been. The love I'd been seeking from others had been inside me all along, waiting for me to turn it inward, toward myself. And no one, no matter how cruel or manipulative, could ever take that away from me again. The house on Maple Street stood quiet in the darkness, its yellow kitchen glowing warm through the windows. Inside, a woman slept peacefully, surrounded by the life she'd rebuilt with her own 2 hands. A life that included advocacy work that gave her purpose, friendships that sustained her, hobbies that brought her joy, and yes, a slowly healing relationship with her son, but a life that would have been complete even without that last piece. She'd lost everything and found herself. And that, in the end, was worth more than any house could ever be.